Oh hi, fancy meeting you here. In the year 2012, DreamWorks Animation Studios put out their sleeper banger of a film, Rise of the Guardians. It's a really solid movie about Santa Claus, the Easter Bunny, the Tooth Fairy all sort of teaming up together Avengers style to defeat the boogeyman. I highly recommend if you haven't already seen it. But one of the reasons that this movie is actually fairly significant to me personally is that it was actually my very first introduction to a mythological character by the name of the Sandman. I don't know about you guys, but I never really heard of the Sandman before. Like the Sandman never really crossed, the Sandman was never in any kind of piece of media that I consumed or anything like that ever. And so who exactly is the Sandman? Well, according to Wikipedia, the Sandman is a mythical character in European folklore who puts people to sleep and encourages and inspires beautiful dreams by sprinkling magical sand into their eyes. Sounds innocent enough, which is why it may or may not come as a surprise to you that I want to murder him. That's right, I have a hit list, and right at the top of that list is this grainy tater tot of a man. And since you clearly have nothing better to do with yourself at the moment, I thought that I would take the time to explain why it is that I want to kill the Sandman, if you'll indulge me. Stephen Pressfield has a pretty short book called The War of Art, in which he describes an invisible force called resistance. I'm not going to go into too much detail because honestly, if you already read nonfiction, you've probably already read this book because a lot of people have already read this book. Resistance is a force that everybody has to a certain extent. Basically, if you've ever found yourself in a situation where you have a passion or a desire or an aspiration of some kind, resistance is kind of the invisible force that continually feeds you excuses as to why you shouldn't pursue that marvelous dream or passion or aspiration or whatever it is. Like maybe you want to make music, but then you kind of feel like you shouldn't waste your time making music because everybody else has already made pretty good music before you. Or maybe you want to dance or act or perform on a stage in front of people, but you also feel like you should lose those 10 pounds before you get up in front of people. Or maybe you want to make a video about your creative struggles, but you feel like it'll probably come off as pretentious. Is it? Probably. The idea of resistance really resonated with me, as I think it did with a lot of people. I like to think of myself as a creative person, and I hope you caught those, because those were some big air quotes right there, bud. It always feels really douchey whenever I say that I'm a creative person. I'm not trying to imply that I make good art. Basically what I mean when I say that I'm a creative person is that I like to make things. I'm always making something if I'm in a good mental state. The quality of the things that I make is kind of up in the air, but the point is that I like to make things. That's what I do. Usually I find that I get super depressed if I'm not being creative in some capacity, which means that the next logical step, of course, would be, then you should just keep making things and then you'll never be depressed. But thanks to this little sucker we call resistance, I guess, it's not really that simple. I'll give you a really good example. In late 2020, I got super nostalgic over this video game that I played when I was a kid called Zoo Tycoon 2, and I was like, hey, I should make a YouTube video retrospective thing about it. So I did. I made a Zoo Tycoon 2 retrospective video. 1 year later. Now, I don't know if you've seen that video or not. You probably haven't, but does it take one person 1 year to make a Zoo Tycoon 2 retrospective video? The answer to that, of course, is no. No, it does not. It does not take an entire bloody year to make a Zoo Tycoon 2 video. I mean, honestly, if I had put my head to it, I probably could have made that entire video in a month. But for somehow reason thingamajig, it just took me an entire year. And I get to a certain degree that there's a lot of people out there who struggle with procrastination and whatever. But for me, in my case, I've always just kind of wondered why, because it's always felt like I've had the resources necessary to make whatever creative thing that I want to make. So for the longest time, I basically just came to the conclusion that I didn't have enough time because, I always had school, or I had work, or I had school and work. And you know how it is, just getting off a nice, really long shift at work and then just kind of wanting to unwind and not do anything productive because you're so tired and worn out and whatever. But I always thought to myself, man, if school and work just kind of disappeared and I had 24 hours in a day and I could do whatever I want and I had any ideas and all of the materials necessary to create whatever passion project I had in mind, I would be limitless. Like, I would just be making so many things. If only I had 24 hours in a day, I would be able to successfully create whatever I wanted, whenever I wanted, however I wanted. I would maybe be a successful artist at that point, like whatever that means, I guess, right? Man, if only, right? I mean, that would be great. And then a miracle happened. COVID-19, that wasn't the miracle. The viruses are bad. I got furloughed off of my job. I was not working. I was not at school. I was living with my parents, so I had absolutely no bills to pay. I had no responsibilities, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I had 24 hours in a day to do whatever I want, however I wanted. It was as if God himself was like, okay, here's your opportunity to just do whatever creatively. And so, as you all know, I successfully wrote 37 songs, wrote 4 books, and got lots of awards and became well respected. 2 things. I made 2 things over the 4 months that I was furloughed, and I had all that time. I made 2 things. One of those things was a video essay that I did on blasphemous, and the other was a song that I wrote. And that's not nothing, but 4 months of 24 hours in a day to myself. And that's all I had to show for it, which was unbelievably discouraging. I probably could have just kept working throughout that quarantine period, and I would have been just as productive creatively as I would have been if I had all that time. The year 2020 was an awful year for a lot of people for a lot of different reasons. But the most difficult part of the year 2020 for me personally was coming to the realization that the biggest obstacle between me and my creative endeavors was me.
And it was always me. I was always probably the source of the issue from the beginning. And that's kind of discouraging, but it's also supposed to be an encouraging thing because, as the saying goes, if you are the problem, then that means that if the problem's out there in the world, then you can't fix that. But you can fix yourself. The problem is, I don't know what's wrong with me. It's a pretty simple equation. If you're a creative person, you just make But there's stuff. Something so paralyzing and just unmotivating about the creative process. I used to just be really antisocial because I thought that if I just spent all of my time focusing on my art instead of going to parties or whatever, that would be a better use of But then I didn't even spend any of that time actually working on the art, so there was no point in being antisocial in the first place. I don't think I enjoy being an artist. I feel like I just have a lot of friends who they just kind of live their life, They just kind of go to work, go to school, and then come home and play games or hang out with friends, and that's enough for them. They're just satisfied with just a normal there's life. This sensation of you're not fulfilling your potential or whatever. It sounds so unbelievably stupid coming out of my mouth, but that's just the best way that I can describe it. But it's hard to make stuff when you're feeling really depressed, and so you end up just kind of not making stuff because you're depressed, and then getting more depressed because you're not making stuff. Being an artist is just constantly coming up with ideas nonstop, and then only doing a couple of those ideas, feeling like garbage because they didn't turn out the way you thought they would. You just sort of learn not to make anything because it's not going to turn out the way you want it to. So you just kind of stop making things for a while, but then you get that inspiration that only pops up whenever it feels like it. And then you go through a lot of self-doubt, and then there's the constantly comparing yourself to other people because there's already people who are 3 years younger than you who are like doing what you do but better. Like, oh, I am not at this point. Well, maybe I and should then that be. Demotivates you even more, which means that you're even less likely to like actually make stuff.
Alternatively, I could just have undiagnosed ADHD and all of life's problems could be solved with some Adderall. Or cocaine. Cocaine would probably do the trick too. I find it really fascinating how when people are talking about their future aspirations, creatively or otherwise, they refer to them as dreams. Like, I want to be a musician. That's my dream. I want to be an actor. That's my dream job. I dream of being X. I dream of being Y, etc., etc. And I think that's really worth thinking about because, like, what is a dream exactly? Like, a literal dream is like this abstract representation of reality that only exists in your head. That also only exists while you are sleeping. I mean, if there's one thing that'll prevent you from being productive, it's sleeping. What a metaphor. What a life. But another, like, really important characteristic of these dreams that people aspire to is they're perfect. The dream itself is perfect. It's an ideal. And it may seem like a good idea to strive toward a perfect ideal in one sense, but in another sense, it can be incredibly unhealthy to set your expectations at perfection. And that's like the whole idea with perfectionism, right? With, like, I'm a perfectionist and like my perfectionism is really bad. Like, it's so unbelievably painful for me to make something and have it not be perfect. It's painful to the degree that sometimes it doesn't even feel worth actually making the thing because you know that it's not going to be perfect. And so if this dream is perfect in your head, but it won't be perfect in real life once you translate it from your head to reality, then you may as well just not make it and just sort of keep it as a dream forever. In the dream world, my art is perfect. And like, there's a legitimate temptation to just keep the idea in your head instead of trying to put in the work to make it a reality because you've been stung by the pain of perfectionism like way too much. And so I'm in like this really weird position where like I have a dream and I really want to make this thing, but I know that if I make this thing, it's not going to be perfect. And because it really hurts when it's not perfect, I just decide to not make the thing. So I just don't make things. But then I also have to make things because if I don't, then my mental health will just die. You have to make mistakes. That's the thing. Because if you make mistakes, you learn. And if you learn, you get better. And if you get better, you slowly inch your way towards perfection, perfecting your craft. So basically, in order to get good at something, you have to learn. And in order to learn, you have to fail. And in order to fail, you have to try. And I can't try if I'm a dreamer. Dreams paralyze me with the perfection and the high expectation that they inherently have because they're dreams. And that, I think, is legitimately the primary way that resistance affects me. And that's why I think that dreams are bad, because they give you these lofty expectations that you'll never meet, and you know you'll never meet, so you never try, and it just stops you dead in your tracks. And so that is why I wrote that sick diss track on the Sandman, because dreams, for me personally, are only harmful to my creative process. Yeah, sorry, I'm like a really big fan of just like overly complicated metaphors. I'm not sure if you've noticed. I am going to go back off the grid and continue making my crappy pretentious art, and you are going to keep doing you, because you are doing wonderful. And I hope you know that, and I hope that you're treating yourself accordingly. I love you. Stay safe. When I see you again, it will probably be in some sort of art or content that means a lot to me, and maybe will mean something to you as well. Because if I'm not killing the Sandman is going to kill me.